Robert Mueller arrived amid great hopes by Democrats that the hearing would spread his report's message to the millions who've never read it. The opening minutes seemed to show that promise, with House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler zeroing in on what President Trump has said about it.
The president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Republicans pressed Mueller on just that issue and the report's statement that while it, quote, does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. Republicans said that sentence took away his presumption of innocence.
Can you give me an example other than Donald Trump where the Justice Department determined that an investigated person was not exonerated because their innocence was not conclusively determined?
I cannot, but this is a unique situation.
Okay, well, Donald Trump is not above the law. He's not. But he damn sure shouldn't be below the law, which is where Volume 2 of this report puts him.
But in 2 hearings, Mueller revealed nothing new, sticking to his pledge to talk only about what was in his 480-page report. Democrats tried to get him to read from 5 of the report's examples of potential obstruction of justice by Donald Trump, but Mueller more than 200 times declined or gave such short answers they did not amount to a cohesive narrative.
No. Yes. No. Correct. True. Generally correct, yes. Yes. Generally, yes. That's accurate.
But Republicans said Mueller was never prevented from doing his job.
Were you ever fired as special counsel, Mr. Mueller?
No.
No. Were you allowed to complete your investigation unencumbered?
Yes.
Mueller pushed back against Republican criticism that his legal team included many Hillary Clinton supporters.
I have been in this business for almost 25 years, and in those 25 years, I have not had occasion once to ask somebody about their political affiliation. It is not done. What I care about is the capability of the individual to do the job and do the job quickly and seriously and with integrity.
And he showed a spark when asked for his reaction to repeated statements from Donald Trump about WikiLeaks posting the emails it stole from the Clinton campaign.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
Problematic is an understatement in terms of what it displays, in terms of giving some, hope or some boost to what is and should be illegal activity.
Mueller said his investigation was no witch hunt and that Russian acts of meddling through phony social media and the hacked emails were real and dangerous.
Would you agree that it was not a hoax, that the Russians were engaged in trying to impact our election?
Absolutely. That was not a hoax. The indictments we returned against the Russians, 2 different ones, were substantial in their scope, using that scope word again. And I think we have underplayed to a certain extent.
Mueller said, as the report does, that though he wanted to interview President Trump, the special counsel team decided not to put up a fight.
The expectation was if we did subpoena the president, he would fight the subpoena and we would be in the midst of the investigation for a substantial period of time.
The president did submit answers in writing, though not to every question the special counsel team asked.
But where he did, his answers showed that he wasn't always being truthful.
I would say generally.
And Pete joins us now. Pete, it's not lost on anyone who watched these hearings today that Director Mueller seemed to be struggling at times. You've covered him for years. What stood out to you?
Well, we last saw him testify 6 years ago, and this was clearly not the hard-charging Robert Mueller we saw then when he was the FBI director. Today, he was sometimes halting and sometimes unsure of himself. He's older now. He turns 75 in 2 weeks, and he clearly did not want to be there today. He appeared only because he was subpoenaed, and he didn't want to say anything more than what's in his report.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.